Welcome everyone to today's Flex webinar. I am your host, Markus. Today, we're going to be talking about cleaning up your projects and other bulk workflow. I wanted to do this webinar because in the patch today, or potentially for some of you would be yesterday, we added bulk workflow to the project lists in Flex 5, which I think is a really great feature. But just showing that would probably take me 2 minutes. So I wanted to dig into what are the main reasons that people would use that. And one of the most common things that I've used it for is, since I've been here at Flex, when a company says, hey, we want to recommit, we want to get better use of our system. And so they book some time with me, and we start to get in and looking at the system. One of the first things I see is a lot of people have their project element lists are a mess, that they've got hundreds or maybe even thousands of open projects in there, and it makes that list load slower, and it makes it harder to find your current active projects. And so one of the big things I do is work with them to get that cleaned up and then talk to them about how to keep on top of it and keep it cleaned up. Okay, so that's the biggest thing that I want to hit. We'll maybe hit a couple other things after that, but let's go ahead and get started with that. So we're in one of the Flex demo systems, so that I know there's kind of some mess in here that needs to get cleaned up, that we kind of need to work on. So again, just as a reminder, when I talk about project lists, we're talking about anything where I go to the menu, to projects, and then any kind of project element. For example, most commonly quotes, or if you've renamed your quotes, whatever you've renamed it as. So when I pull this one up here, we see that I've got 332 open projects in here. But as we look, even just glancing right here, I've got things from 2018, 2019, 2020. These are currently not active projects. Now, again, this is a demo system. That's a big reason for it. But I have seen in lots of people's systems where they didn't close out their inquiry shows. The inquiry show didn't happen. And rather than making sure to cancel it, they just kind of left it there and moved on. And it makes more of a mess. This page loads slower, and it makes it harder if you're trying to search or find things to do them. So I'm a big fan of making sure to move things into closed statuses so that that list becomes shorter and is really only your current active projects. Okay. So for the first thing I want to highlight is that in the default system for the quote project element, the closed statuses that have the closed attribute is both canceled and closed. I know it's a little confusing because there's a closed status with the closed attribute, also the closed the attribute on the canceled. But if I hit this button to say include closed, we'll see in here that then I have some that say closed. I might have some that say canceled. That's kind of the goal. This goes up to 363, okay? A few more. That's kind of the key in here, is we want to do that, because that's an important part. Is if I need access to those documents later, I can get them. I can just click that to say include closed, and I can go get them, and I can still open them up. I can open them back up and use them if suddenly the show came back. I could copy them if I wanted to just use some of the data from it. There's a lot of good things there, but for most of the time, I want to be focused on my current open projects. Okay, so we're going to talk about how to start to clean this up. Okay, so one important thing in this is for the bulk workflow, I can only run workflow on the things that are in the same status, so they have the same workflow options. Okay, if I try to run it against these three that are in different places, it's going to go, they don't have the same choices, and so I can't do anything. Okay, so always the first thing we need to do is decide which thing we want to work on that I'm going to filter down to just those. So in this, I'm going to say I only want to work on these inquiries. I'm going to find a bunch of old inquiries that didn't happen, and I'm going to cancel them out. Okay. Then the next in that is I potentially want to filter down my start date. Now I could either do this by just sorting the time to say, hey, only give me the old ones. So we see here I'm getting 2016, 2016, 17, and then only 2018s. Okay. So that's probably a good place to start. Okay, I'm only inquiries, and I'm all old. None of these could be ones that are current that I'm actually paying attention to, because we don't want to cancel any of those. Okay. The next thing in this is you can run workflow on individual ones on these lists by going to the three-dot menu. This was added in a fairly recent patch. But if I click that three-dot menu, that's the workflow for this item at the current state. So we see that we have the availability to cancel, and that's kind of my plan of what I want to do to this. But the key thing you'll see is that the default in most system is going to do this. It's going to pull up to send an email. Now, if I did this individual one, I can say, well, this is old. I don't need to alert Chris and Brandon. Let's not bother them about this. And I can run this, okay? So I can go ahead and do that. But if I go to do this as a bulk, it is not going to pull up that email every single time, and I don't want to have to do that. So which means, though, it's still going to send it. It's just not going to give me a chance to remove the documents from it. And I don't want to send 50 emails to Chris and Brandon and fill up their email. So for this, I want to make a temporary workflow action to do this cleanup, okay? Now, I'm not going to get too detailed into that workflow. You want to refer back to the previous basic and advanced workflow webinars from last year, but I will pop over here. As just a quick reminder that to do this, I have to change the workflow. This is still only in Flex 4. I'll make sure to do an update when this has been moved over, but we're on projects, workflow. That's this list. I'm picking the workflow I want, which is quote workflow, and then I'm here. So I'm looking at my inquiry and I have that canceled, but I don't want to mess up that in case somebody today goes to cancel an active project and they do want to send out and make sure someone's aware, hey, we lost this project. And so I'm going to make a new workflow action really quick that I'm just going to say, maybe I'm going to say like inquiry cleanup. Okay, so it's even extra. I know that for me, this is moving it from inquiry to canceled, but I'm reminding me this is the point, this is for cleanup. Okay, I'm going to say that it's going from inquiry to canceled. I don't want to add that email, but I do very commonly want to say, I want to make this so it's administrator only, so that not just anybody can do this. For this moment, I'm not going to bother because I'm going to clean this up immediately afterwards. But if this was going to take a while, you might want to make it so only you as the admin could take care of this and that your other people aren't going, what is this new workflow? I don't get this, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and create that. I'm going to pop back over to our Flex 5 window. I believe, let me see, that if I go here, yep, already just by clicking there, we see now that I see show inquiry cleanup, okay? Pretty straightforward and simple. So to do that as a bulk though, I can now go and click this all. Now it is important right now, I'm in a page thing, I have 50 records, okay? Of my 127 that are inquiry in here. I didn't filter any of the date, I just filtered the order, I just sorted it, so we know these are old, but I would maybe have some of these I didn't want to do. So for the moment, I can just leave this to say, sure, let's just take care of that, okay? So then it's now, for people who knew how to do this in the past, in Flex 4, it's up in the top right, like everything else, it's been moved down to here, and you see it's that same workflow icon from a regular thing that is our bulk workflow. So I click that, and it looks at them and says, hey, here's all of the shared workflow options. My inquiry cleanup is right at the top. It's reminding, hey, this is going to end up at canceled. And that's an improvement that we've made from the past where it just reminded the thing and you had to know what it was going to do. It's going to remind you what it's going to do. So I can then click that and say, yep, that's what I want to run. Say, okay. And you'll see it kind of has that list that it's sort of just like, plunking through. 72, 78, 86, 96, and done. I have now moved all of those to canceled, okay? Now it's filtered back because now I still have one of 77. Now, if I want to at this point say, I want to make sure I'm not getting anything else, I could go in here and say, well, only give me, last year or maybe a custom date and say, let's only get, maybe let's double check and get only some 2019 things. So let's double check to say, let's just, let's not worry about 2021s. Maybe we still need to do some more, pay attention to them, but I want to filter this to say, let's make sure I'm getting all my 2019s cleaned up. So there's my filter for that. Say, okay, that's going to cut that from 77 down to 47. And then I could go ahead and do another chunk of these. Okay. So that's kind of the great thing there. Now, I'm going to do one more kind of demonstration. some issue somewhere in there. We'll have to see what happened with that. I think there were just some specific ones that had a problem, and we'll just kind of need to pay attention to that. It just seems that these 6 were unhappy with it, and we'll have to look. Sometimes that could just be this demo system, because we fiddle with the settings a lot when making demonstrations to people. And so overall, you see that that worked and that it went quicker than when I do those same kind of things in Flex 5. So one thing I want to show is that, let me just clear all these filters. One of the other most common things that people will do bulk workflow for is for having an accountant, especially if it's a contractor or an accounting company, or you have kind of a part-time accounting person, to move things to invoice and or to export your invoices to QuickBooks, okay? And I'm not gonna do that, but I just wanna kind of show in that example again, that if I was like on my invoices, I could have potentially a chunk of invoices that have not been exported. It would be these unpaid. So I could then sort through a chunk of these, decide, hey, these are these recent ones, and then run that bulk action of exporting them to QuickBooks. So I can kind of do those in a chunk rather than having to open and run each individual one. That's a fairly common thing. And is another major kind of reason to use the bulk workflow. I'm not going to bother to process that. I don't think the system is actually currently attached to a QuickBooks account, but that's one of the other common. The one other biggest thing that I want to highlight is some companies, because on the quotes, they are by default designed that if you take them through the process, it will get to a closed state, a closed status, okay? Or if you take the time and remember to cancel things, it will get closed. You can keep this a little cleaner naturally. The one thing is in the default settings for a long time, I've changed them some recently, but for most customers, for pull sheets and for manifests, they didn't by default go into a closed status. So if I go to my pull sheets, for example, here, this return status, so that's the end of the list, that's where it's done, is not closed, it's not done. Okay, and I would think of returned as, hey, that's done, it's finished, okay? And so I very likely want to clean up that. Again, I see I've got over 500 pull sheets in here, and in the same way on my return date, that I've got a lot of very old ones in here, okay? And even if I then filtered this to say, well, only show me the returned ones, I've still got a good chunk of these that I would actually consider these would be closed. These are finished, okay? We'll see what happened there. And so we want to make this, and this one, the key is it's a little different of a problem, okay? The key on here is first, we have to go into our system settings and our status options, and we need to go find, oh, I should have preloaded this. The returned status and said, oh, see, this says it's not a closed status and I want this to be a closed status. Now, here's the important thing on this. In Flex, the attributes of a, let's see if that properly loads. The attributes of a project are given on the action of moving statuses, of running the workflow action. So even if I change to say returned is now considered a closed status and I force a reload on this, these are still going to sit here. They're not closed because they were given that status when the attributes were different. It's not dynamic. It sets them on them being moved into the process. So if I want to have them be returned but be closed, I've got to kind of bounce them out somewhere and then bounce them back, okay? So that's the kind of thing that we will have to do to make that happen. So I got that to save, that updated status. So in this, we're gonna go to our workflow for our pull sheet linked workflow on this. And so right now, we have in here our kind of statuses. And to make sure I don't get confused in the middle of this, I don't want to hit any of these because these are actual statuses that might go. And so what I want to do is I want to make a new workflow state for this temporary bounce, okay? So I'm going to call this just my place saver. Now, I'm not going to go ahead and add a status. So all I'm going to do in here is I'm just going to make sure to pick a status that I know this would never make any sense for here. And so that I can know that's the one that I'm trying to fix on this. So we could do something like, oh, this is past due. That doesn't have any sense to make sense in a pull sheet or whatever. Not really. I mean, technically it could. Maybe instead I'd rather do this payment received. I'm not going to receive a payment on a pull sheet to just help me know, hey, temporarily, I just need to have this sit somewhere so I can move it out and then move it back. Okay. So then in the same way, now I've got that new state in here. And so I'm going to make the action. So these are all currently on return. So I'm going to say move to place saver. I want to say this is going from returned over to my place saver. I'm not going to bother with setting these, but again, you could do the executor group if you feel like this is going to take you a little while to finish this project. And then in here, we're going to make another workflow action to set as returned. And this is going from our place saver to our returned. And so now we can go back over to Flex 5. We can do that same filter where we can say, okay, I only want ones that are currently set as returned. Oh, I'm going to have to do one other change. I forget. This is just a key thing to note. This drop down where here it's saying, here's your available filters. That is not based on what it sees available, and I think this is just because it's simpler for programming and cleaner. It's based on what statuses you've told are applicable to that document type. So what we have to do is go to the project element, to the pull sheet, and then we're going to go to that status options and say that that payment received is temporarily a thing. And then we just, after all of this is done, we want to undo this. We want to turn off all these settings we've changed in here. But we want to get our cleanup completed first. Sorry, this unfortunately, these settings pages always just take a long time to load because there's so many settings in here. It will be a great day when we get these pages moved over to Flex 5 and they get to open faster. So if I go to my status options and I look through here and say payment received is also applicable in this, that will now let me fully do this process that I'm planning. So I can come back here. I can, again, now filter. Oh, I have to reload this. To get my available filters updated. So now we see payment received is also in here. Now, still for the moment, I need to do returned. And I'm going to take and sort it by that return date to just make sure these are as old as possible. And I'm going to do a chunk of these and bulk workflow, move them to place saver. We see I don't actually have any other workflow currently in this because most of the workflows on these are designed to be automated and be through the finalization process. So I don't have any other choices. You'll see that that's running through there and plunking through those quite quickly. Again, for anybody who is comfortable with this and knows how to do this in Flex 4, this process is much quicker in Flex 5. Now that I've done that first section, I'm going to just go ahead and switch to say payment received only. And so we have those. For whatever reason, these have a messed up color code. That doesn't really matter to me. I'm going to then select them and hit to do my bulk workflow. And I'm going to set them back as returned. Running through that same pile, nice and quick. And so now if I set that back to returned, I'm not going to bother to do the rest of them on this, but I show here I'm at 1 of 50 of 65, but if I now include closed, then that 65 will jump up to 115 because I have 50 of those that actually have that closed attribute, though they're still all just set as returned, they properly got that closed attribute. So that to me is the most common things that I like to do. I like to keep these lists clean and short and only kind of active current projects. That makes it easier to load, faster to find things that matter. And again, you can always still access those old projects. So thanks everybody for your time today. And if you have any other questions or needs, as always, you can reach out to support or training at Flex Rental Solutions. And feel free to go to our help center at helpcenter.flexrentalsolutions.com for other advice. Thanks so much. Bye.